My daughter called me in tears saying she had nowhere left to go. I opened my home, immediately believing I was saving her family. But just a few days later, my son-in-law placed a stack of papers in front of me called a living agreement. My daughter sat beside him, gently saying they were just a few small rules for everyone. I didn't argue. I simply signed my name in silence. Then months later, in that same living room, I handed my son-in-law an envelope. When he read what was inside, his face went pale and the room suddenly fell silent. Thank you for being here and taking a moment to listen. Before we continue, leave a quick comment and tell me where you're watching from. I always enjoy seeing how far these stories travel. Also, please note that some elements in this story are fictionalized for storytelling purposes. Any resemblance to real people or places is purely coincidental, but the message behind it may still be meaningful and worth reflecting on. The kitchen smelled like rosemary and garlic. I was rinsing cherry tomatoes in the sink, the water running cool over my hands when I heard his voice. At first, it was just a murmur Brandon talking upstairs in what used to be Michael's office. The house was old, built in the 70s, and the vent system had always been quirky. Sometimes, if you stood near the stove, you could hear everything from the room above. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I was just standing there shaking water off the tomatoes when his words came through the vent, sharp and clear. Yeah, the old lady signed everything. I froze. My hands stilled in the colander. The faucet kept running, but I didn't move to turn it off. Brandon's voice continued easy and confident. The POA is rock solid. I've already moved 30 grand. $30,000. My breath caught. I set the colander down slowly, carefully, like any sudden movement might give me away. The tomatoes sat glistening in the afternoon light, but I wasn't looking at them anymore. I was staring at the ceiling at the vent grate where the paint had started to peel. She's got about $150 left in the account, Brandon said, and I heard him laugh. No, she has no idea. Jessica's on board. Jessica. My daughter. I gripped the edge of the counter. The formica was cool beneath my palms, the only thing keeping me upright. My legs felt weak. Another few months and we can get her to sign the house over. He continued so casual. She's 65, retired teacher. No one's going to believe her if she tries to claim anything. We'll just say memory issues. Memory issues. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run upstairs and demand to know what he'd done. But I couldn't move. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. By Christmas, the house will be in my name, Brandon said, and there was that laugh again. And the old lady will be in some facility. Sunrise charges $4,800 a month, way cheaper than keeping her here. $4,800. Assisted living. They were going to take my home, the home Michael and I had bought 32 years ago, the home where we'd raised Jessica, where I'd hosted birthday parties and Thanksgiving dinners and quiet Sunday mornings with coffee on the back porch. They were going to take it and lock me away somewhere, because I'd signed. I'd signed the papers Brandon had given me, the power of attorney, the one he said was just for emergencies, just to protect me. I felt sick. The faucet was still running. I reached over and turned it off, my hands shaking. The sudden silence was deafening. Upstairs, Brandon was wrapping up. Yeah, don't worry, it's almost too easy. Talk soon. Footsteps. He was moving toward the stairs. I grabbed a dish towel and dried my hands, forcing myself to breathe to look normal. The tomatoes. I picked up the colander, then opened the cupboard for the cutting board. My hands were trembling, but I made them steady. I had to look busy. Brandon's footsteps came down the stairs, slow, unhurried. Then he was in the doorway, leaning against the frame with that easy smile. Hey, Mom, he said, his voice warm. Smells good. What's for dinner? I turned to face him, and somehow I managed to smile back. Just a salad, I said. My voice sounded almost normal. Nothing fancy. Perfect, he said, walking to the fridge and pulling out a beer. He popped the cap and took a long drink, then headed back toward the living room. Let me know when it's ready. I stood there in the kitchen alone again, the cutting board in my hands, and I whispered so quietly that no one could hear, I need help, right now. That night I barely slept. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Brandon's words looping through my mind. The old lady signed everything, 30 grand. By Christmas, the house will be mine. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard his laugh, but it hadn't always been like this. 6 months ago in January, when Jessica called me crying, I never could have imagined it would come to this. I remember that call so clearly. It was a Tuesday afternoon, cold and gray, the kind of Portland winter day where the sky hangs low. I'd been grading papers' old habit even though I'd retired 5 years earlier when my phone rang. "Mom!" Jessica's voice was shaky. "Mom, I don't know what to do." I set down my red pen. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" "We're going to lose the apartment. Brandon lost his job 3 months ago, and we're so far behind on rent, and Mom, I don't know where else to turn." My heart broke for her. Jessica, my only child, who used to help me bake cookies on Saturday mornings, and who'd held my hand at Michael's funeral 5 years ago. "Come home," I said without hesitation. "Come stay with me, you and Brandon and Emma. There's plenty of room." "Mom, I can't ask you to—" "You're not asking. I'm offering." I looked around the empty living room, too big, too quiet, filled with memories of a life I'd shared with Michael for 33 years. "I'd love to have you here. I'd love to have Emma here." Emma, my granddaughter. 6 years old, with Jessica's dark curls and Michael's smile. I hadn't seen her in almost 4 months. Brandon always had some excuse. But if they lived here, I could see her every day. "Are you sure?" Jessica whispered. "I'm sure." They moved in on January 8th. I spent the week before preparing cleaning the guest room, setting up Michael's old office for Emma to play stocking the fridge with Emma's favorite snacks. I even bought a new coffee maker, one of those fancy ones that made lattes, because Brandon liked those. I wanted them to feel welcome. The day they arrived, Emma ran up the porch steps and threw her arms around my waist. "Grandma," she squealed, and for the first time in months I felt something other than loneliness. Jessica hugged me too, tears in her eyes. "Thank you, Mom. I don't know what we'd do without you." Brandon came last, carrying boxes from the U-Haul. "Thanks for this, Mom," he said, flashing that easy smile. He'd been calling me Mom since he married Jessica 8 years ago. "We really appreciate it." "It's what family does," I said. The first few days were wonderful. Emma and I baked chocolate chip cookies. Jessica and I sat on the couch drinking tea. I felt useful again, needed. The house felt alive. But then I started noticing things. Small things at first. Brandon would interrupt whenever Jessica and I talked about money. "Don't worry about that, Mom, I've got it handled," he'd say even when I was just asking about groceries. He'd steer the conversation away, his hand on Jessica's shoulder firm. One morning I mentioned property taxes were due soon. Brandon immediately jumped in. "How much do you pay? Who handles that? Do you have someone managing your finances?" "I manage them myself," I said, defensive. "I've been doing it for 40 years. "Of course," he said smoothly. "I just meant if you ever need help, I'm happy to take a look. I used to work in finance." I didn't know that. I wasn't even sure it was true. Then on Friday of that first week, Brandon asked me to sit down at the kitchen table. Jessica was upstairs with Emma. He had a notepad in front of him. "Mom," he said, "I've been thinking. Now that we're all living together, we should probably set some ground rules, just so everyone's on the same page. Nothing major, expectations, schedules, that kind of thing. It'll help everyone live more harmoniously." Ground rules. I felt a flicker of irritation, but I pushed it down. 3 adults and a child under one roof, it made sense to have structure. "Sure," I said. "That sounds reasonable." But even as I said it, something felt off. This was my house, my home. Why did I need his permission to set rules? Brandon smiled. "Great, I'll draft something up and we can all review it together." I nodded, but the uneasy feeling stayed with me, a small knot in my stomach. "It's just temporary," I told myself. "They'll get back on their feet and things will go back to normal." I had no idea how wrong I was. Friday morning, Brandon found me folding laundry in the living room. "Hey, Mom," he said. "Do you have a minute? I want to go over those ground rules we talked about." I set down the towel. "Sure." He gestured toward the kitchen. "Let's sit at the table. I printed everything out." When I walked in, I saw he'd already set up his laptop, open a stack of papers in the center. 3 pages stapled together. The header read in bold, "Household Living Agreement, Multi-Generational Residence." Jessica was already there, hands wrapped around a coffee mug. She gave me a small smile. I sat down slowly. "What's all this?" "Just a framework," Brandon said, sliding the document toward me. "I know it looks formal, but this is pretty standard. It protects everyone." I picked up the papers. The first page had a preamble about harmonious living and mutual respect. Below were 4 sections numbered and bulleted. Section 1, Financial Boundaries. Household bills will be managed by Jessica Hayes Carter. Barbara L. Hayes will contribute a proportional monthly share. Discretionary spending over $100 should be discussed with household managers. My name formal and cold on the page. Discretionary spending. I looked up. You mean my own money? Brandon leaned forward, patient. Not restricting Mom, just coordinating. If we're all living together, it helps to know what everyone's spending. But it's my account. Of course. This is just about communication. I looked at Jessica. She was staring into her coffee. Section 2. Grandparent-grandchild interaction. Grandmother-granddaughter time should be scheduled at least 48 hours in advance. Food and treats require parental approval due to dietary sensitivities. Discipline decisions rest solely with parents. 48 hours. I had to schedule time with my own granddaughter. Brandon, this feels I'm her grandmother. I used to babysit Jessica without a rule book. I know, and we love that you're involved, Jessica said quickly. But times are different. There are allergies, routines. Emma's pediatrician has guidelines. What allergies? Mild ones. Brandon cut in. Dairy, certain nuts. We have to be careful. I didn't remember Emma having allergies. Section 3, shared space. Quiet hours, 9 p.m. to 7 a.m. Visitors require 24-hour advance notice. I thought about Ruth, my neighbor, who dropped by with coffee on Saturday mornings. Now I'd have to call ahead. Section 4, communication protocol. Concerns should be directed to Jessica first. Photos of Emma may not be shared on social media without parental consent. I set the paper down. Why do I need permission in my own house? Brandon didn't flinch. It's not permission, Mom. It's respect. This benefits everyone. But I'm the homeowner. I've lived here for 32 years. Jessica reached across and took my hand. Mom, please. This isn't about control. It's about clarity. Remember how hard it was when Grandma Jean lived with us? We're trying to avoid that. I did remember. 6 months of tension, small misunderstandings that grew into arguments. Brandon pushed a pen across the table. If there's anything you want to change, we can talk about it. I stared at the signature line on the 3rd page. Barbara L. Hayes, homeowner/primary resident. Below were lines for Jessica and Brandon as secondary residents. It's just temporary, right? I asked. Until you get back on your feet. Of course, Brandon said. Jessica squeezed my hand. Thank you, Mom. I picked up the pen and signed my name in the space provided. Brandon signed next his signature, loose and confident. Then Jessica, small and careful. Brandon picked up the document. Perfect. I'll make copies for everyone. He left. Jessica kissed my cheek and followed him upstairs. I sat alone staring at the spot where my signature had been. Something felt wrong. Not the words exactly, but the weight of them. The way they'd turned my home into something that needed rules and permissions and advance notice. But I'd signed it. And I had no idea what I'd just agreed to. 3 days after I signed the agreement, Emma came running into the kitchen. Grandma, can we bake cookies today? Please. My heart lifted. Of course, sweetheart, chocolate chip. Yes, Emma clapped her hands. I was pulling flour from the pantry when Brandon appeared in the doorway. Emma, he said calmly, did you ask your mom first? Emma's smile faltered. No, but... And Grandma, did you check Section 2.3 food needs pre-approval? My face flushed. Brandon, it's just cookies. Emma has dietary restrictions. Jessica and I need to review ingredients. He crouched to Emma's level. Why don't you go play upstairs, honey? Emma's face fell. She looked at me, then trudged out without another word. I stood holding the flour, the mixing bowl empty on the counter. It's for her safety, Mom, Brandon said. But Emma had never had allergies before. 2 days later, Ruth showed up Saturday morning with coffee from the cafe, just like she'd done for 15 years. Morning, Barbara, she said, smiling. Ruth, thank you. Brandon was already coming down the stairs. Good morning, Ruth Wright. He smiled pleasantly. I hate to be that guy, but we've got a household policy visitors need 24-hour notice, just to keep things organized with Emma's schedule. Ruth's eyebrows went up. She looked at me. My face burned. I'm sorry, Ruth. I should have called. No, I didn't realize. Ruth handed me my coffee. I'll call next time. She left. I stood on the porch watching her walk away, feeling something inside me shrink. The next week, I bought gummy bears at the grocery store, Emma's favorite, $3. I left them on the counter for her. Jessica found them first. Mom, you can't just give Emma candy without asking. It's $3 worth of gummy bears. Section 2.1. Gifts over $20 need approval and no sugar after 3 p.m. It's almost 4. She dropped the bag in the trash. I stared. You're throwing them away? Emma doesn't need them. We're teaching her healthy habits. When I raised Jessica, I gave her candy sometimes. Now I couldn't give my granddaughter gummy bears. At the end of the 3rd week, Jessica came with a piece of paper, a budget breakdown. Mom, utilities and groceries have gone way up with 3 extra people. We think it's fair if you contribute about $500 a month. $500. Jessica, I'm still paying the mortgage. It's my house. I know, but we're all using utilities. It's only fair. Fair, that word again. I didn't want to make things harder for her. Okay, I said. By the end of January, I felt like a guest in my own home. When I called Linda, my friend from teaching days, Brandon always appeared in the doorway listening. I'd cut conversations short, feeling watched. Emma stopped running to greet me. She'd glance, then look away like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to hug me anymore. One night, I sat alone in my bedroom, the agreement on my lap. I read through it again, the sections, the rules, the clauses that sounded reasonable on paper. Discretionary spending over $100 should be discussed with household managers. Grandmother-granddaughter time should be scheduled 48 hours in advance. Visitors require 24-hour notice. This wasn't about respect. This wasn't about clarity or harmony. This was control. But even as I realized it, I didn't understand how deep it went. I didn't see the full picture yet. I just knew that something was very, very wrong. April arrived with cherry blossoms and rain. 3 months had passed since Brandon and Jessica moved in. I'd grown used to the quiet tension, the unspoken rules. I told myself it was temporary. Then Brandon brought up estate planning. It was a Tuesday evening. Jessica was upstairs with Emma. Brandon sat across from me at the kitchen table, his expression serious but kind. Mom, I've been thinking about something. Your finances, your future. He leaned forward. You're 65 retired. If something unexpected happens, a fall, a stroke, who would manage your accounts, your medical decisions? I shifted in my seat. I manage them myself. I know, and you're sharp. But what if something happens? His voice softened. We saw what happened with Michael. He didn't have any plans in place. The hospital forms the bank accounts. It was so hard on you and Jessica. My throat tightened. Michael's stroke had been sudden. The aftermath was a nightmare of paperwork, closed accounts, decisions I made alone while drowning in grief. I don't want Jessica to go through that again, Brandon said. What are you suggesting? A power of attorney, just a precaution. He pulled out his phone. It's called a springing POA. It only kicks in if you become incapacitated. If you're fine, it sits in a drawer. But if something happens, we can step in without lawyers and courts and red tape. Springing. That made it sound temporary, conditional, safe. I don't know, I said. Jessica came downstairs, then sliding into the chair beside me, her hand covering mine. Mom, Brandon's right, she said quietly. When Dad passed, the bank wouldn't even talk to me. It took weeks to access his pension. If we'd had a POA, it would have been easier. Her eyes were shiny with tears. I squeezed her hand. Brandon's phone buzzed. Actually, I reached out to an attorney I know, Richard Foster. He specializes in estate planning. He's willing to do a video call right now, just an informational conversation. Before I could answer, Brandon was setting up his laptop. A man appeared on screen, early 50s, graying hair, glasses, and office with bookshelves behind him. He looked professional. Good evening, Mrs. Hayes, he said warmly. I'm Richard Foster. Brandon asked me to walk you through some options for protecting your estate. Richard spent 10 minutes talking about powers of attorney, healthcare directives, asset protection. He used phrases like fiduciary duty and legal safeguards and standard practice. He made it sound routine. The key thing, Richard said, is that a springing POA doesn't give anyone control unless you're medically unable to make decisions. It's purely protective. And if I'm fine, I asked, then it sits in a file cabinet and collects dust. He smiled. Think of it like insurance. That made sense. After the call, Brandon closed the laptop. What do you think? I suppose it makes sense. I'll have Richard draft the documents. A week later, Brandon came home with a thick envelope. The POA paperwork, he said, setting it on the table. I opened it. The document was at least 15 pages, single-space dense with legal language. Words like principal and attorney in fact and durable authority swam across the page. This is a lot, I said. Standard estate planning language, Brandon said. Richard explained everything. Remember, it's just the legal version. I flipped through pages trying to understand the clauses. Can I take a few days to read this? Brandon hesitated. Of course. But honestly, it's a standard form. Richard's been doing this 20 years. Jessica appeared with 2 cups of tea, setting one before me. Mom, I know it looks intimidating, but it's really just protecting you and us. If something happened and we couldn't help, her voice caught. I thought about Michael again, the chaos, the fear. Okay, I said. Where do I sign? Brandon flipped to the last page. Right here, and initial here. I signed my name, Barbara L. Hayes, on April 8th, 2024. Jessica wrapped her arms around me. Thank you, Mom. Thank you for trusting us. Brandon shook my hand, formal and warm. You've made a smart decision. You're protected now. I nodded, trying to ignore the knot in my stomach. I'm doing the right thing, I told myself. But as Brandon carried the documents upstairs in his briefcase, I felt something I couldn't name, a sense that I'd just handed over more than a signature. I'd handed over control. 1 month after I signed the power of attorney, I was checking my bank account online at the kitchen table. It was something I did every week, a habit from 35 years of teaching. I liked knowing where my money was. I logged in and scrolled through recent transactions. Then I stopped. $8,000, withdrawn yesterday, May 8th. The description read emergency home repair authorized by POA. My stomach dropped. I didn't authorize this. I didn't even know about it. I found Brandon in the garage organizing tools. There's $8,000 missing from my account, I said, my hand shaking. He glanced at my phone screen, then nodded calmly. Oh yeah, the roof repair. What roof repair? Last week, that big rainstorm Tuesday night. Water was coming through the ceiling in the guest bedroom. I called an emergency contractor before the damage got worse. I tried to remember. There had been rain. But water in the guest bedroom, I didn't remember seeing any. I didn't see water damage, I said. Brandon pulled out his phone, showing me a photo of the guest bedroom ceiling, a dark stain spreading across the plaster. See, it was bad. If we'd waited, the whole ceiling could have collapsed. You were at your doctor appointment when I found it. I stared at the photo. I didn't remember seeing that stain. Why didn't you ask me before spending my money? Brandon's expression shifted slightly. Mom, it was an emergency. The contractor said if we didn't fix it immediately, we'd be looking at $15,000-$20,000 in structural damage. I used the POA because you weren't home. That's what it's for. He walked to a filing cabinet and pulled out a paper. Here's the invoice. I took it. The letterhead read ABC Roofing and Repair with a Portland address. The line items listed emergency roof patch, interior ceiling, repair, water damage mitigation. The total was $7,800. What about the other $200? Processing fee for emergency call-out. It's standard. The invoice looked real professional, printed, signed by J. Anderson. But something felt wrong. You should have called me. He sighed. I tried. You didn't answer. And according to the agreement section 1.1, Jessica and I manage household bills. This is a household bill. I opened my mouth to argue, then stopped. The agreement did say that. Jessica appeared in the doorway, Emma behind her. What's going on? She asked. Your mom's upset about the roof repair, Brandon said. Jessica looked at me. Mom, Brandon saved the house from serious damage. If he hadn't acted fast, we could have had mold rot structural problems. You should be thanking him. My face flushed. I just wish he'd told me. He tried, Jessica said. You were at the doctor. What was he supposed to do? Ugh. Emma tugged Jessica's hand. Mommy, can we go to the park? In a minute, honey. I stood there holding the invoice, feeling foolish. Maybe I was overreacting. Isn't that why I'd given them the power of attorney? I'm sorry, I said quietly. I wasn't expecting it. Brandon put a hand on my shoulder. I get it. It's a shock. But the house is safe now. Jessica smiled. We're all just trying to take care of each other. That night, I sat alone in my bedroom, the invoice beside me. ABC Roofing, $7,800, emergency repair. It all made sense. The rainstorm, the water damage, the urgency. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I didn't remember seeing any water. I didn't remember Brandon mentioning a roof problem before today. And $8,000 gone just like that without my knowledge. I told myself I was being paranoid. Brandon had shown me the photo, the invoice. He'd followed the agreement and the POA. But as I turned off the light, I made a decision. I was going to watch my account more carefully from now on. I didn't know yet that this was only the beginning. The pattern started 2 weeks later. I was checking my account again when I saw another withdrawal, $5,000, mid-May. The note said, property tax payment including late penalty. I found Brandon in the kitchen. Property taxes, I always pay those on time. He pulled up something on his phone. They were overdue. The county sent a notice. You must have missed it. I don't remember getting a notice. It was in the mail stack. Maybe you overlooked it. He showed me a receipt, official looking, stamped. $5,000, $3,200 for tax, the rest penalty. But I paid taxes every November. Why would they be overdue in May? Brandon had a receipt, though. I didn't want you to lose the house over a missed payment, he said. 3 weeks later, $7,500, early June. Medical expense reimbursement. What medical expense? I asked Jessica. Your procedure in April. Your insurance didn't cover everything. Brandon paid the difference, now he's reimbursing himself. What procedure? She looked concerned. Your mammogram, Mom. The follow-up. You had to go back twice. I'd had a mammogram in April, but there was no follow-up. Wasn't there? I don't remember. The doctor's office called. You asked Brandon to handle it because you were stressed. She took my hand gently. Mom, it's okay. People forget things. You're getting older. Mid-June, $3,200. Utility arrears, 4 months overdue. Brandon showed me a spreadsheet. Electric, water, gas unpaid since February. But I always pay bills. You used to, Jessica said softly. But we've been managing them, remember? That was part of the agreement. This is you reimbursing us. I stared at the spreadsheet. The numbers looked real. Mom, Jessica said, her tone making me look up. You're getting old. Sometimes people forget. There's no shame in it. That's why we're here. Old, forgetful, confused. The words settled over me heavy. Early July, $6,800. Homeowner's insurance renewal. I always renew that myself. You missed the deadline. I had to do an emergency reinstatement. Brandon showed me a letter from an insurance company I didn't recognize. Can I call to confirm? I already handled it. The house is covered. By the time I thought to call, I'd forgotten the company name. I started keeping a notebook. I hid it in my nightstand under old birthday cards. Every time money disappeared, I wrote it down. May 8th, $8,000. Roof repair. May 15th, $5,000. Property tax. June 3rd, $7,500. Medical reimbursement. June 18th, $3,200. Utility arrears. July 2nd, $6,800. Insurance renewal. I didn't tell anyone. Not Ruth, not Linda. I was afraid of what they'd think. What if I was wrong? What if I was just confused, forgetful old? On the last day of July, I sat on my bed with the notebook open. I added up the numbers with a pencil, my hand shaking. $8,000 plus $5,000 plus $7,500 plus $3,200 plus $6,800 equals $30,500. $30,500. Gone in less than 3 months. I stared at the number and a cold thought crawled through my mind. Am I being robbed? But how could I think that Brandon and Jessica were family? They lived here because I invited them. They were helping me managing bills I supposedly couldn't handle. Jessica said I was getting old, forgetting things. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was losing my mind. Or maybe I closed the notebook and shoved it back under the cards. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to trust. I didn't even know if I could trust myself anymore. If you're still here with me, comment 7 so I know you're still following the story. And tell me if you were in my place watching money disappear while your own family said you were just forgetting. Would you stay silent or start looking for the truth? Also, a quick note, the next part includes some dramatized elements for storytelling purposes. It was late afternoon on July 31st when everything I'd been trying not to believe became impossible to deny. I was standing at the stove stirring a pot of chicken soup. The kitchen was warm, the windows fogged with steam. I'd been moving through the motions all day like a ghost ever since I'd sat on my bed that morning and added up the numbers in my notebook. $30,500. Gone. I kept telling myself there had to be an explanation, a reasonable one. Brandon and Jessica couldn't. That's when I heard his voice. It drifted down through the heating vent near the ceiling, the one that connected to the office upstairs, Michael's old office. The house was old, the vents poorly insulated, and if you stood in just the right spot, sound carried. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I was just standing there, wooden spoon in hand, when Brandon's words came through clear as day. Yeah, the POA is rock solid. I stopped stirring. I've already moved $30,000. She's got about $150 left in the account. My grip tightened on the spoon. No, she has no idea. Jessica's on board. She knows what we're doing. Jessica. The spoon slipped from my hand and clattered into the pot. I barely heard it. Another few months and we'll have her sign the house over. Brandon continued, his voice easy, almost bored. She's 65, retired teacher, lives alone. If she tries to make a fuss, no one's going to believe her anyway. We'll just say memory issues, confusion. Richard set the whole thing up perfectly. Richard. The lawyer who'd seemed so professional, so trustworthy. She signed everything without even reading it, Brandon said, and then he laughed low and satisfied like he'd just won a bet. The old lady trusts us completely. It's almost too easy. Old lady. That's what he called me. Not Mom, not Barbara. Old lady. My legs felt weak. I gripped the edge of the stove to keep from falling. By Christmas, the house will be in my name, he said, and we'll stick her in some facility. Sunrise charges $4,800 a month, way cheaper than letting her stay here. We'll sell the house, pocket the difference, and she'll be out of the way. Out of the way. I pressed my hand to my mouth, biting down hard on my knuckles to keep from making a sound. Everything clicked into place. The agreement that had turned my home into a prison of rules and schedules. The power of attorney I'd signed believing it was for my protection. The $8,000 for a roof repair I'd never seen. The property taxes I'd supposedly forgotten to pay. The medical bills I didn't remember. The utilities. The insurance. None of it was real. It was all a lie. Brandon had been stealing from me for months, and Jessica, my daughter, my only child, had known. Had helped. They were going to take my house. They were going to lock me away in some facility and pretend I was too confused, too old, too broken to know what was happening to me. And I'd let them. I'd signed the papers. I trusted them. I doubted myself when I should have been doubting them. Upstairs, Brandon was wrapping up his call. Don't worry, man, it's all going according to plan. Talk soon. Footsteps. He was moving toward the stairs. I grabbed a dish towel and wiped my hands, my whole body shaking. I turned back to the stove, picked up the spoon, stirred the soup, even though I couldn't see it through the tears blurring my vision. I had to look normal. I had to act like I hadn't heard anything. Brandon's footsteps came down the stairs, slow and casual. He walked into the kitchen, and I felt him behind me before I heard his voice. Hey, Mom. I forced myself to turn around. He was leaning against the door frame, that easy smile on his face, the same one he'd worn every day since he moved in. Smells good, he said. What's for dinner? I opened my mouth. For a moment, I didn't think any sound would come out, but somehow I managed. Just soup, I said. My voice sounded almost normal, almost. Perfect. He walked to the fridge, grabbed a bottle, twisted off the cap. Let me know when it's ready. He left the kitchen whistling. I stood there alone, the spoon still in my hand, the soup bubbling on the stove. And I whispered so quietly that no one in the world could hear me, except myself. I need help, right now. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with my hands wrapped around a mug of coffee I couldn't drink. I'd barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Brandon's voice. The old lady trusts us completely. At 7:30, I heard movement upstairs, Jessica's voice gentle with Emma, Brandon's footsteps in the hallway, the sounds of a normal morning. I waited. At 8, they came downstairs. Emma ran to me, throwing her arms around my waist. Bye, Grandma! I hugged her tight, breathing in the smell of her shampoo. Bye, sweetheart. Jessica kissed my cheek. We'll be back around 4. Brandon grabbed his keys from the counter. See you later, Mom. I watched through the window as they drove away. Then I grabbed my purse and walked straight to Ruth's house. Ruth Williams had been my neighbor for 15 years. She knew me before Michael died, before Jessica grew distant, before I became the old lady who couldn't be trusted with her own life. When she opened the door and saw my face, she didn't ask questions. She just pulled me inside. Barbara, what happened? I tried to speak. Nothing came out except a sob. Ruth led me to her couch, sat beside me, waited, and I told her everything. The agreement that controlled when I could see my own granddaughter. The power of attorney. I'd signed thinking it would protect me. The $30,000 that had disappeared in 3 months. The phone call yesterday, Brandon's voice casual and cruel, planning to steal my house and lock me away. When I finished, Ruth's face was white with fury. That son of a bitch, she said. And Jessica, she knows. Brandon said she's on board. My voice broke. My daughter. My own daughter. Ruth grabbed my hands. Listen to me. We're going to fix this right now. She pulled out her phone and dialed. Thomas, it's Ruth Williams. Yes, I know it's early. I need your help. It's urgent. Thomas Rivera's office was in downtown Portland, a small suite with plants on the windowsill and degrees on the wall. He was maybe 52, with graying hair and kind eyes that turned sharp when Ruth explained why we were there. Mrs. Hayes, he said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. Please sit down. Tell me what's happened. I told him everything again. This time, it was easier. Thomas listened without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When I got to the phone call, when I repeated Brandon's words, Thomas set down his pen. Mrs. Hayes, this is textbook elder financial abuse, he said. Your power of attorney has been misused. We need to act immediately. Can we stop them? Yes, but we have to move fast. He turned his notepad toward me, writing as he spoke. Here's what we're going to do. First, we revoke the POA. I'll draft the revocation today. Second, we freeze your bank accounts so Brandon can't access them anymore. Third, we file a police report. Fourth, we gather evidence bank statements, any recordings you might have. And fifth, if necessary, we get a restraining order. My head spun. A restraining order against my own daughter. Thomas's voice softened. Let's take this one step at a time. Right now, we need to protect you. But Jessica... I felt tears sting my eyes. If she really knew, if she helped him... We'll find out the truth, Thomas said. But first, you have to be safe. Do you understand? I nodded. Good. He pulled out a business card, wrote a number on the back. This is my cell. Call me anytime, day or night. We're going to get through this, Mrs. Hayes. You're not alone anymore. When I left Thomas's office, the sun was still high, but everything felt different. Ruth walked beside me to the parking lot, her arm linked through mine. We're going to fight, she said. They're not taking your house. They're not taking anything else from you. I stopped walking and looked at her. Ruth, I don't know what I'd do without you. You won't have to find out. She squeezed my arm. You're stuck with me now. For the first time in months, maybe since the day Brandon and Jessica moved in, I felt something other than fear and confusion. I felt hope. And I wasn't alone anymore. The day after I met Thomas, I became a spy in my own home. He'd given me a list. 5 things I needed before we could move forward. I started that night. Bank statements. After everyone went to bed, I sat at my laptop and logged into my account. I printed every statement from April through July, highlighting each unauthorized withdrawal with a yellow marker. $8,000, $5,000, $7,500, $3,200, $6,800. At the bottom, I wrote total $30,500. I hid the folder under my mattress. Fake invoices. One afternoon when Brandon and Jessica took Emma to the park, I went to the office upstairs. My hands shook as I opened the filing cabinet. The invoices were there, ABC, roofing, the property tax receipt, the insurance letter. I photographed everything with my phone, then put it all back. That evening, I called ABC Roofing. Do you have a record of service at 2847 Maple Street in Portland? The woman checked. No, ma'am, we've never done work there. The invoice was fake. The power of attorney. I waited until a Tuesday morning when they went grocery shopping. I had 40 minutes. I found the POA document and read it carefully this time. The words at the top, Durable power of attorney, effective immediately upon execution. Not springing, not conditional, immediate. Brandon had lied. The POA had been active from the moment I signed it. I photographed every page, my stomach churning. Recording. Thomas told me Oregon was a one-party consent state. I could record conversations as long as I was part of them. I downloaded a recording app. The next time Brandon mentioned property taxes, I had my phone in my pocket recording. I still don't understand why they were late, I said. You forgot to pay them, Mom. It happens. But I always pay in November. Maybe you missed it. You've been forgetting things lately. His voice was so patient, so kind. I had the recording, and I had bank records proving I'd paid on time. Richard Foster. Thomas called me in late August. I looked into Richard Foster. He's not a licensed attorney in Oregon, not licensed anywhere. I found him on social media. He's Brandon's college friend. His real name is Richard Sterling. He works in sales. My blood went cold. It was all fake. Yes, Thomas said gently, but this is good evidence. For 8 weeks, I lived 2 lives. During the day, I smiled. I made dinner. I pretended everything was fine. At night, I lay awake terrified. Brandon would notice something, a page out of place, a strange call on the phone bill. Ruth called every morning. You okay? I'm okay. Thomas checked in twice a week. Any problems? No, I'm careful. I thought about Jessica constantly. Did she really know? Was she being manipulated too? And I thought about Emma. I was doing this to protect her. On the last Friday in September, Thomas called. Barbara, we have everything. Bank records, fake invoices, proof the POA was misrepresented recordings, documentation that Richard Foster is fraud. We have a timeline amounts motive. I sat down. What now? Now we revoke the power of attorney. Then we confront them. Are you ready? I looked out the window. Emma was in the backyard pushing her doll on the swing set. The sun caught her hair. I took a deep breath. I'm ready. On the morning of September 26th, I walked to the mailbox at the end of my driveway. There was an envelope waiting, thick, official looking. The return address read, Cascade Real Estate Group. My hands went numb. I tore it open right there on the sidewalk. Dear Mrs. Hayes, this letter confirms that Brandon Carter, acting under power of attorney on behalf of Barbara L. Hayes has requested a property appraisal for 2,847 Maple Street, Portland, Oregon, in preparation for sale. Our appraiser will conduct the evaluation on October 10th, 2024, at 10 a.m. Please ensure access to all rooms. The letter slipped from my fingers. They were selling my house. Brandon had already started the process. In 2 weeks, a stranger would walk through my home, assign it a value, and then I ran back inside and grabbed my phone. Thomas answered on the second ring. Barbara, they're selling the house. My voice cracked. I just got a letter from a real estate company. Brandon requested an appraisal for October 10th. Silence, then. They're accelerating the timeline. We need to move now. Can you come to my office this afternoon? Yes. 2 o'clock. Bring the letter. Thomas's office felt different this time. Not calm and reassuring, but urgent. He had documents spread across his desk when I arrived. Sit down, he said. We're going to end this today. He slid a paper toward me. At the top, in bold letters, Revocation of Power of Attorney. This document revokes the POA you signed in April, Thomas explained. When you sign it and we get it notarized, Brandon loses all legal authority over your accounts, your assets, everything. We'll send copies to your bank immediately. We'll also send one to Cascade Real Estate to stop the sale. I stared at the document. My name, Barbara L. Hayes, was typed at the bottom, waiting for my signature. Once I sign this, he can't touch my money anymore. Not a cent. And the house? The sale stops. You're the owner, only you can authorize a sale. I picked up the pen Thomas offered me. My hand didn't shake this time. I signed my name clear, firm, deliberate. Thomas called in a notary public who'd been waiting in the next room. She watched me sign a second copy, stamped both documents with her seal, signed her name beside mine. Make copies, Thomas told his assistant. One for the bank, one for Cascade Real Estate, one for our files, and one for Mr. Carter and Mrs. Hayes Carter. He turned back to me. I also prepared this. He held up another document. Notice of intent to file elder abuse claim. We're going to give this to Brandon tonight, along with the revocation. It puts him on notice that we have evidence and we're prepared to pursue legal action. Tonight? Yes. I'm coming to your house at 7 p.m. I'll have a police officer with me for your safety and as a witness. We're going to present these documents to Brandon and Jessica and ask them to leave your home within 48 hours. My stomach dropped. 48 hours! If Brandon refuses, we'll file for an emergency restraining order. But I think once he sees we have evidence, he'll leave. He won't want police involvement. What about Emma? The words came out as a whisper. Thomas's expression softened. If Jessica cooperates with us, if she's willing to answer questions and help us understand her role, she and Emma can stay temporarily while we sort things out. But Brandon cannot remain in your house. Do you understand? I nodded. Are you sure you're ready for this? I thought about the listing letter, October 10th, 2 weeks away. Brandon had planned to have me out of my home, by then moved into some facility, powerless, forgotten. I'm sure. Thomas handed me the revocation and the notice, both in a folder. Keep these with you. At 7 o'clock, we change everything. I stood holding the folder against my chest. Thomas, I said, thank you for believing me. When I first came here, I wasn't even sure I believed myself. He smiled, warm and genuine. You're one of the bravest people I've met, Barbara. Tonight you take your life back. I walked to my car, the afternoon sun bright overhead. In a few hours, Brandon would know that I knew, that I'd been gathering evidence for weeks, that his plan had failed. I was terrified, but I was ready. Before we continue, a quick note, the next part of this story includes some dramatized elements and may not reflect real events exactly. If you're enjoying this story, please consider sharing the video and subscribing to the channel so you don't miss the next ones. And if this kind of content isn't for you, feel free to stop watching here. I heard the doorbell at exactly 7 o'clock that evening. My hands were damp as I walked through the hallway of my own home. The house I'd lived in for 42 years, raised my children and grown old with Michael in. Behind me in the living room, Brandon was watching a football game. Jessica sat in the armchair with a magazine. Emma played quietly on the carpet with her stuffed animals. I opened the door. Thomas Rivera stood on my porch in a dark gray suit, his briefcase in one hand. Behind him was a woman in her late 30s, wearing a navy blazer and slacks. A gold badge was clipped to her belt. "Good evening, Mrs. Hayes," Thomas said softly. I nodded and stepped back to let them in. Brandon's head turned toward the door. The remote slipped from his hand. He rose slowly from the sofa, his expression shifting from confusion to alarm. "Mom, what's going on? Who are these people?" Jessica looked up from her magazine, her face suddenly tense. Emma stopped playing. Thomas walked calmly into the center of the living room and set his briefcase on the coffee table. "Mr. Carter, my name is Thomas Rivera. I'm Mrs. Hayes' attorney. This is Detective Sarah Martinez with the Portland Police Department, Elder Abuse and Financial Crimes Division." Brandon's face went pale. "Elder abuse, Barbara. What the hell did you tell them?" Jessica stood up, the magazine falling from her lap. "Mom," I stayed near the door, my voice quiet but steady. "I told them the truth." Thomas opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick manila folder. "Mr. Carter, on April 8th of this year, you presented Mrs. Hayes with a power of attorney document. You told her it was a springing POA that would only become effective if she became incapacitated. That was a lie." He laid a sheet of paper on the coffee table, the same document I'd photocopied from Brandon's office drawer weeks ago. "This is a durable, immediate power of attorney. It granted you full control over Mrs. Hayes' bank accounts, real estate decisions, and financial affairs the moment she signed it. You've been using that authority to systematically steal from her." Brandon's jaw clenched. "That's not stealing. Those were legitimate household expenses. I have all the receipts." "Forged receipts." Thomas placed another document on the table. "On May 8th, you withdrew $8,000 from Mrs. Hayes' savings account with a memo stating emergency home repair authorized by POA. You presented an invoice from ABC Roofing and Repair for $7,800. I contacted that company personally. They have no record of any service performed at this address. The invoice is a fabrication." Jessica's hand went to her mouth. "Brandon." Thomas continued, his tone calm and relentless. On May 23rd, you withdrew $5,000, claiming it was for overdue property taxes and penalties. Mrs. Hayes' property taxes were paid in full in November of last year. On June 4th, $7,500 for alleged medical expense reimbursements that never occurred. On June 18th, $3,200 for a 4-month utility debt that didn't exist. On July 9th, $6,800 for homeowners insurance. Mrs. Hayes had already paid 6 months earlier. He spread the bank statements across the table like a hand of cards. Total unauthorized withdrawals, $30,500. Brandon's face flushed red. This is ridiculous. Barbara agreed to help us financially. She knew we were struggling. I knew nothing. My voice cut through the room sharper than I'd intended. I stepped forward. You lied to me, Brandon. You told me that POA was only for emergencies. You told me those expenses were real. You made me feel crazy for questioning you. You stole from me. His eyes narrowed. Stole from you? We live here, Barbara. We take care of you. You think you'd manage on your own. I managed for 65 years before you moved in. Detective Martinez finally spoke, her voice calm and official. Mr. Carter, I suggest you listen carefully. The room fell silent except for the muted sound of the television still playing in the background. Brandon stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. His face flushed a deep red. This is my house. I've taken care of her for months. She's old. She doesn't remember half of what happens around here. Detective Martinez's voice cut through the room, calm but edged with steel. Mr. Carter, I strongly advise you to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used as evidence. Thomas reached into his briefcase once more and pulled out a small digital recorder. He set it on the coffee table. We also have a recording of a phone conversation you made on July 31st. In that call, you admitted to transferring $30,000 and discussed plans to have this house in your name by Christmas. You also mentioned placing Mrs. Hayes in a facility that costs $4,800 a month. He pressed play. Brandon's voice crackled through the speaker, unmistakable and clear. The old lady signed it. $30,000's already moved. We'll have the house before Christmas. Sunrise charges $4,800 a month, but the account can cover that for 100 years. The blood drained from Brandon's face. Thomas stopped the recording. Oregon law permits recording when one party consents. Mrs. Hayes, as the homeowner and a participant in her own household, had every right to document what was happening in her own home. Brandon's eyes darted toward Jessica. Jess, you have to believe me. This is all a misunderstanding. Jessica stood slowly, her hands trembling. Brandon, you told my mother that POA was conditional. You said it would only activate if she couldn't make decisions for herself. But Thomas just said it was immediate. You lied. Brandon reached for her hand. Jess, it's just a technicality, a legal formality. Jessica yanked her hand away. You lied to me. You lied to my mother. She turned toward me, her face crumpling. Mom, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know he'd taken that much money. Thomas's voice was gentle, but firm. Ms. Carter, if you cooperate and provide truthful information, we'll take that into account. But I need to ask, did you know about this plan? Jessica sank back into the armchair, her hands covering her face. Her voice came out choked and broken. I knew Brandon had debt. Gambling debts. He said he needed to borrow some money temporarily. I thought it was just a few thousand. I thought he'd pay it back. I didn't know about the letter from the real estate company. I didn't know about a nursing home. Detective Martinez made notes in a small black notebook. Brandon's voice rose, panicked. I need to call my lawyer. Detective Martinez looked up, her expression unreadable. You have that right, Mr. Carter. But first, I need to inform you that based on the evidence presented here tonight, I have a warrant for your arrest on charges of financial exploitation of an elderly person, forgery, and fraud. She stood and pulled a pair of handcuffs from her belt. Brandon Carter, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. Brandon stumbled backward. No, wait, this is insane. Detective Martinez stepped forward and calmly turned him around, securing the handcuffs around his wrists. The metallic click echoed through the room. Footsteps pounded down the stairs. Emma appeared in the doorway, her stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest. "Mommy, Daddy!" Jessica rushed to her, kneeling down and pulling Emma into her arms, shielding her view. "It's okay, baby. It's okay. Don't look." I stood frozen near the doorway, watching as Detective Martinez escorted Brandon toward the door. My chest ached. This wasn't victory. This was a family shattered. Brandon glanced back at me as he was led out. For a brief moment, I saw something in his eyes. Fear, maybe, or regret. Then he was gone. Jessica collapsed onto the floor, still holding Emma, sobbing into her daughter's hair. I walked over slowly and knelt beside them. I placed my hand gently on Jessica's shoulder. She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." I pulled her into my arms, my own tears spilling over. "We'll get through this, but first you have to tell the truth." The morning after Brandon's arrest, I woke to an empty, quiet house. Jessica and Emma were still asleep upstairs. For the first time in months, I made coffee in my own kitchen without watching the clock, without worrying about breaking a rule I didn't agree to. But the silence felt heavy, not peaceful. The next 2.5 months, from late September through December 2024, became a slow, painful process of investigation, revelation, and fragile repair. Detective Martinez called in early October. "Mrs. Hayes, our forensic accountant, has completed a full audit of your accounts. The total amount stolen wasn't $30,000. It was $45,000. I sat down hard in the kitchen chair. $45,000? Yes, ma'am. There were additional transfers we didn't catch, initially smaller amounts moved into online gambling accounts and cash withdrawals at ATMs in Washington state. Mr. Carter has a gambling problem. He owes approximately $78,000 to casinos and offshore betting sites." My hand tightened around the phone. $78,000. He'd been desperate, and I'd been his solution. "There's more." Martinez continued. "Richard Foster isn't his real name. It's Richard Sterling. He's a college friend of Brandon's who works in pharmaceutical sales. He's never been licensed to practice law in any state. We've arrested him on charges of fraud and impersonation." I closed my eyes. Every piece of the lie was unraveling. A week later, Thomas called. "Jessica has agreed to cooperate fully with the district attorney's office. She's provided testimony that Brandon told her he was borrowing temporarily from you and would pay it back. She admits she signed documents without reading them carefully, but she swears she had no knowledge of the plan to sell your house or place you in a memory care facility. Do you believe her?" I asked quietly. Thomas paused. "I think she was willfully ignorant. But yes, I believe she didn't know the full scope. The DA has agreed to grant her immunity in exchange for her testimony against Brandon." Jessica and I finally sat down together one afternoon in mid-October. She'd been avoiding me spending most of her time in her room or taking Emma to the park. But that day, she came into the kitchen while I was folding laundry. "Mom," she said, her voice breaking, "I know I hurt you. I was blind. Brandon told me you'd be fine. He said you had more money than you needed. He said you wouldn't even remember." She covered her face with her hands. "I'm a terrible daughter." I set down the towel I was holding and reached for her hand. "Jessica, you're my daughter. I love you. But I can't trust you yet. You need to prove to me that you've changed." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'll do anything. Therapy. I'll get a job and pay you back. Please. Please don't give up on me and Emma." I sighed. "I will never give up on Emma, and I'm not giving up on you, but you need to start therapy and take a financial management course. I'll help you, but this time, we do it the right way." Thomas helped me close my old bank accounts and open new ones with stricter safeguards. The $45,000 couldn't be recovered immediately. Brandon had gambled most of it away, but the DA's office included full restitution as a condition of his sentencing. I would receive approximately $200 a month from Brandon's prison wages and later from any income he earned after release until the full amount plus interest was repaid. Emma didn't understand everything. Jessica and I told her only that Daddy made some bad choices and has to go away for a while. Barbara spent more time with Emma, no more 48-hour notices, no more approved foods. We baked cookies. We read books. We went to the park. In early December, Thomas called again. Mrs. Hayes Brandon has accepted a plea deal. He'll be sentenced in January. 5 years in state prison, full restitution, and 5 years of probation after release. I exhaled slowly. 5 years. Emma will be 12 when he gets out. That's the consequence of his choices, Thomas said gently. Not your fault. I hung up and looked out the window at Emma playing in the backyard, her laughter carrying on the cold winter air. We were starting to heal. It was a warm Saturday afternoon in June 2025, 18 months since Jessica Brandon and Emma had moved into my home, 9 months since Brandon's arrest. I sat in a wooden chair in my backyard watching Emma chase a soccer ball across the grass. Her laughter rang out bright and uncomplicated. I thought back to the courtroom in January. Brandon had stood before the judge in an orange jumpsuit, his face pale and hollow. The judge's voice had been calm but firm. Mr. Carter, you exploited the trust of a woman who welcomed you as a son. You abused legal authority to steal $45,000 from her and conspired to take her home. This court finds your actions to be a severe case of elder financial abuse. You are hereby sentenced to 5 years in Oregon State Prison, full restitution of $45,000 plus interest, and 5 years of supervised probation upon release. Brandon had turned toward Jessica and Emma in the gallery, tears streaming down his face. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Jessica had looked away. In the months that followed, Jessica began intensive therapy focused on codependency and emotional manipulation. She found part-time work at a local preschool thanks to a reference letter I'd written for her. She started paying me $200 a month, a symbolic gesture more than a real repayment, but it mattered. Our relationship was rebuilding slowly. We weren't as close as we'd been before, but there was respect now and boundaries. I found a new purpose too. I began volunteering with a local organization called Elder Rights Coalition. Once a month, I spoke at community workshops, sharing my story to help other seniors recognize the warning signs of financial exploitation and psychological manipulation. It was hard at first admitting I'd been a victim, but every time someone came up afterward and thanked me, saying they'd recognized something in their own life, it felt worth it. Ruth remained my closest friend. We met every Wednesday for tea and conversation. She never said, "I told you so," though she'd been the one who'd seen through Brandon from the start. She simply sat with me, listened, and reminded me I wasn't alone. Emma turned 7 in March. She hadn't seen her father since the arrest. Jessica had explained only that Daddy made mistakes and needs time to fix them. Emma accepted it in the way children do, with questions at first, then gradually with silence. But Emma and I had built something new. Every Saturday morning we baked together. Cookies, muffins, cinnamon rolls, whatever she wanted. No approved food lists. No 48-hour notices. Just flour on our hands and music on the radio. One evening in mid-June, Emma came running down the stairs, her hand cupped over her mouth. "Grandma, Grandma, I lost a tooth." I knelt down as she opened her palm to show me a tiny white tooth, barely bigger than a kernel of corn. "Oh, sweetheart, did you put it under your pillow yet?" Emma grinned, revealing the gap in her smile. "Not yet. I wanted to show you first." Tears welled in my eyes, not from sadness, but from something much deeper. Joy. Gratitude. I thought of Michael, how proud he would have been to see this moment. "Thank you for showing me," I whispered, pulling her into a hug. Later that evening, I sat in my backyard as the sun began to set. Jessica was inside preparing dinner. She and Emma still lived with me, but under terms, we'd both agreed to terms that were healthy and clear. Ruth stopped by with a pitcher of homemade lemonade. "You look peaceful," Ruth said, settling into the chair beside me. I smiled. "I feel peaceful. For the first time in a long time." Ruth nodded. "You fought back, and you won." I watched Emma kick the soccer ball toward Jessica, who'd stepped onto the porch. "I didn't win alone. Without you, without Thomas, I would have lost everything." The sun dipped lower, casting golden light through the maple trees. Emma's laughter echoed across the yard. Jessica caught my eye from the porch and offered a small, genuine smile. I whispered to myself, "We're going to be okay." And this time, I truly believed it. Looking back on everything that happened, I never imagined I'd become one of those grandma stories you hear about, the ones where trust becomes a weapon and family turns into a trap. But here I am, and I'm sharing this because I don't want you to end up like me. If there's one lesson I learned from this painful chapter, it's this: love doesn't require you to surrender your autonomy. When Jessica and Brandon moved in, I thought being a good mother and grandmother meant saying yes to everything, signing whatever they asked, trusting without question. I was wrong. Real love includes boundaries, accountability, and the courage to ask hard questions. These family drama stories aren't just entertainment, they're warnings. Elder financial abuse happens to teachers, nurses, engineers, people who spent their whole lives being careful and competent. It happened to me. It can happen to anyone. My advice: never sign a power of attorney without consulting an independent lawyer, not one your family brings to you, but one you choose. Never let anyone isolate you from friends like Ruth who see what you can't. Never accept house rules that make you a guest in your own home. And please, if something feels wrong, trust that instinct. God gave us intuition for a reason. I used to think grandma stories like mine only happened to people who weren't paying attention. Now I know predators count on our love, our loneliness, and our desire to keep the peace. Brandon knew exactly what he was doing. Jessica was complicit through willful blindness. And I almost lost everything because I didn't want to believe my own daughter could betray me. But here's what I also learned: it's never too late to fight back. These family drama stories don't have to end in defeat. With Ruth's friendship, Thomas's expertise, and God's grace, I reclaimed my life, my home, and my dignity. So please learn from these grandma stories, especially mine. Protect yourself, ask questions, set boundaries. Don't sacrifice your security for the sake of keeping peace in family drama stories that shouldn't exist in the first place. Your life, your home, your money, they're worth defending, even from the people you love most. Thank you for walking with me through this difficult journey. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What would you do if you found yourself in a situation like mine, caught between family, loyalty, and self-preservation? Your perspective matters to me. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing so you won't miss future videos. A gentle reminder: while inspired by real-world issues of elder abuse and family manipulation, certain elements have been dramatized for storytelling purposes. If this content isn't to your taste, feel free to explore other videos that might suit you better.